Welcome to another episode of the Drew's News podcast and YouTube channel. Today, I am so excited for today's episode. I had the absolute pleasure of having a University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications alum, Henry Coburn, in the house. I like to call him the GOAT of journalism. He's someone that I've looked up to for as long as I can remember now. So, thanks for joining me today, Henry. How are you?
Drew, thanks for the kind words. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I think your project is really cool, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Absolutely. So, just to get started, if you could tell our viewers and our listeners today a little bit about Henry Coburn.
Okay, so, sheesh. I wrote down a couple notes, so I'm going to try to scan through those. But basically, my name is Henry Coburn. I'm a reporter. I work for WSPA 7 News in the upstate South Carolina. I am a Gator grad, of course, graduated from the same program that Drew is in now. And I began working shortly before the pandemic began. So I started 2 days before Christmas of 2019, and then got thrown into the whole job world right out of college in a pretty big news market, and was trying to play catch up and trying to figure out where I work and kind of how I work with everything. And then the pandemic hit and everything went kind of sideways from there.
Absolutely. What was your favorite part about the J School?
Okay, favorite part of the J School is absolutely the people there. I from the first day I walked in, because I was going to go talk to Forrest Smith. He was over the morning edition radio production. He was like the big radio news director in the newsroom.
Love Forrest. He's great.
Fantastic guy, right?
Hope he's enjoying retirement.
Oh my gosh, and that sweet new truck he has. But my first time meeting Forrest, and I think it was probably similar for you, Drew. The guy is kind of intimidating the first time you meet him, right? So I didn't really know where the CJ or like the newsroom was, the INC, and I walk in and I'm like, oh, where's Mr. Smith's office? Like a freshman or whatever. I was probably a sophomore at that time. And then I'm like just wearing like what I had worn to class. So, like t-shirt, backward hat, jeans. I go and I sit down, and Forrest just gives me this look, like, like he kind of narrows his eyes at you a little bit and just like stares at you. He's like, one of the first rules that you should learn about being in the INC is we don't like to wear hats in here. And I was like, well, I guess I'm removing my hat and having hat hair in this interview for this one thing that I want to do. And it's not going to go well because this guy is already scaring me. Turns out like he was the nicest guy, and he kind of like jump-started my career into radio and eventually into TV. And he was a wonderful mentor and friend all along the way. But oh my God, he was scary at first.
Absolutely. I thought the same. And then when you get to know him, he's like a big teddy bear. So
he described himself that way, and he's like, I don't know why people are so terrified of me. I'm a big teddy bear. It's like, yes, Forrest, but you come off real intense at first. You can scare people.
yeah, he did scare me my first day. But then after that first day, he was like, yep, you're incredible. I'm glad that you're here. Let's get you doing some work. So
Yeah. So that was like, I guess, my first memory of the J School. Another favorite memory, also Forrest involved. So my first time, I started out associate producing Morning Edition with Katie Switalski. She was my producer, and she was the anchor, and I was just helping write stories. And then toward the end of the semester, she and Forrest decided, like, Henry, it's time for you to go on air. So they came into the booth with me, and I'd never been live on air before. I was terrified. And about 20 seconds before my hit began, Forrest and Katie just smile at me, and they're like, no matter what you say, don't say the F word on air because you're going to be live. And of course, that like jump started like a whole stream of invasive thoughts. Like, why on earth would you plant that in my head? Because I probably am going to mess up my first time being live. And why would you just plant that when I mess up, I should not say this? Because like, it's probably going to happen now. Thankfully, it didn't.
That's incredible. That's a great story. What is your favorite story that you've covered so far? I'm sure you have lots of them, and why?
Yeah, so I've been in my current station for over a year now. And I've gotten the opportunity to work with a bunch of really cool people and tell a bunch of really cool stories. So one of my favorite things to report on is weather. Got a good portion of my education, about as far as I could go at UF at the time, in meteorology and climatology. So I worked at the weather station, all this good stuff at UF. Um, but since I've come here, I haven't really gotten to utilize my weather skills as much. That changed in April of last year. We had a really strange, unusual spring for the upstate, and we had this rash of tornadoes that just broke out in April. And there is a small rural community, essentially like a couple homes and a couple trailers out in the wilderness. It's called the Laurel and Hardy community. It's on the border of the Greenville Pickens County line. Half of it is in Greenville, half of it is in Pickens County. So there's a tornado that strikes the area, Laurel and Hardy, and we'd seen reports from like the National Weather Service. They said, "Oh yeah, this is one of the worst hit areas." So my producers were like, "All right, go out to this place and wait and see if you can go in." And terrible cell service, so I wasn't going to be able to really send too much out. But it was a one way in, one way out community. And it was blocked off by emergency vehicles and highway patrol. And anyway, we finally get let back in. And you have to drive, like there's a hill on one side and then you have trees on the other, and it's super rural, right? Well, you just drive in and I'm like, this doesn't look that bad. This doesn't look that bad. And then I started to see it, and it was just like splinters where trees used to be. Like there was an RV I remember that was like flipped on its side, and like homes were just completely destroyed. Trees had fallen through. People were just like their lives had been destroyed. And just seeing that, it really just hit me. It's like, wow, this is like, I'm like, this is a big story. Like there are so many people. Like, are there any injuries? Did people get killed? Like these people need help. So that day, it was really late in the day, like I said, so I barely got much of a glimpse of it. I kind of got an idea as to how bad it was. But then the next day I got to go out and actually try and find some of the people who were impacted to talk to. And this one woman, I remember her name was Tronda because it had a weird spelling.
Wow.
And she had been sleeping in her bed, and she just recounted this story to me. She was like, I fell asleep and I woke up and I felt wet, like on my head, like something was dripping on my head. And that's what woke me up. The tornado had come through, dropped a tree right through her roof, about that far from her head. So it had like vines and everything were stuck in her hair, and it was like dripping on her head. And it was just like this horrible situation. Like there was so much destruction in this community. Like not one home was untouched. Um, and then just getting to meet those people out there, and like just hardworking everyday people, and their lives had been destroyed, but like what could they do? They just had to pick up and keep going with what they had and start repairing then and there. And then, so one day I got to cover the damage, and we pulled out our station drone and flew it around and got a better idea of just how widespread the damage was. And then the following day I got to cover some of the relief efforts from like the local churches and like the Red Cross and everybody coming in to help. And it was just really nice, I guess, for me being able to see the story's beginning and being able to follow it through the next day and the next day. And even maybe another day after that, it was because so much, and Drew, I'm sure you understand this, and the more you work in this business, you will. So much of the time, you're not able to follow up with those things that you cared about. It's like there are these other angles that we can take to this, say, animal abuse case. Like there's so many more people we need to talk to, but you just can't because it's no longer the news of the day. So getting to follow through and feel like I was learning about that community and meeting the people there. Thankfully, there were no deaths, no major injuries. Everyone survived. It was incredible. but just, I think that whole experience of seeing just how impactful our jobs can be and sharing the stories of people who have never had a TV camera pointed at their face, who have never, their lives were unremarkable until this happened.
Mhm. Yeah, and something to speak of, the impactful journalism. It's nothing better than making a difference in the lives of others. And when we see our work making a difference, it's the greatest reward of this business. I recently did a story on homelessness here in Gainesville. Like, I know we've done homelessness forever and ever, right? But
Right.
I decided to take it a different angle and get a perspective from a UF student of what do you think it would be like if you were in the shoes of a homeless person? And the man I talked to, his story was incredible, and just to get to share his story just meant the world to me. It did my heart good, and like you said, we wish that we could follow up. There's so many other angles that we can take. There's so much more that we could dive into if we had more time, but it's just, it's not the news of the day anymore.
Right. No, I absolutely understand that. And it's like so different. Like it's so cool that our job allows us to speak with people from all walks of life. Like I don't think there's any other occupation in which like you get to go and talk to a surgeon and then the next person you talk to could be a homeless person. It's like it's just such a wide range of livelihoods and the types of people you meet. It's very fascinating.
The types of people, and I say the types of people, and oh, the places you'll go. Some of the places that
Yes.
we go and we've been sent on, and we're like, oh wow, we wouldn't be doing this in any other occupation. So
You're not wrong.
truly incredible. How have you adjusted from the college world of journalism into the professional world? How was that for you?
So it was a whirlwind when it happened, right? Like I graduated and then 4 days or 5 days later, I had to move and start my new job in a place that I had visited once for the job interview. So lots of big changes coming there, figuring out everything that being an adult is, right? The responsibilities of like taking care of your own space and like moving and working and it was a little bit tough at first. It was because it had been a while since I'd really done a whole lot of work with the camera, a whole lot of reporting. So my first couple of stories looked like pretty bad.
Shaky,
Um,
hey, did you have any shaky video in there?
I probably did.
Oh, no shaky video here.
I know, I know. So it was just like a lot of learning all at once, right? Um, and the transition, I think work wise has gone really, really well. I feel like I've started to find my groove and I'm starting to improve little by little here and there. In fact, yesterday, Saturday, was the first time my managers wanted me to come in and start practicing at the anchoring desk for, fill-in opportunities. So of course I was super stoked about that. So I've come a long way from, how do I use this camera again to, feeling more comfortable with what I'm doing and being given more opportunities for growth. Um, Personally, it's been tough, right? Because it's a pandemic and you move to a new location where you don't know anybody and your work keeps you out from, when you leave home at 9 in the morning until sometimes 8 o'clock at night. And that's how it was for my first couple of weeks, a lot of long, long days. So making friends is of course tough. It's tough as an adult anyway. It's even tougher when a pandemic hits and shuts everything down. So it's kind of been this weird duality for me of like work is going really well and then I also have no social life. So it's a good time.
You have a dog though, right?
No, I don't have a dog. My girlfriend had a dog, and I'm not going to go off on the huge tangent of what happened. But long story short, we had to put the dog down like a week or two ago. So no more
Oh
dogs.
man, I kept seeing the dog being posted, and I was living my best life. I want a dog so bad.
Oh, bro, you and me too. Like my landlady won't allow dogs. That's the only reason I don't have one, or like six already. I'm a big dog fan. So I was watching dogs for like my family, and I would have like Dot, which was my girlfriend's dog, come and visit here and there. But Yeah, no, dogs are just the greatest, aren't they?
Gotcha. Yep, we all need a friend. We all need a companion. And when we can't have a social life, like in this business, animals are great to come home to.
It is really nice to come home to a happy face.
Exactly. No matter how your day is going, they're happy to see you.
Exactly, exactly.
So you could have picked any other occupation to choose from, but you chose to be a broadcast journalist. Why?
So it's kind of funny. And when you sent me the list of questions that you kind of wanted to touch on ahead of time, this one kind of made me laugh because I did not come to college wanting to be a journalist. I went to college thinking that I was going to go the med school route because that's what my brother did. My dad's a now retired physician. I'm like, my whole family's in this. Like, if they can do it, I can do it.
It's in the genes.
Yeah. So plot twist, it was not in the genes. And I started off college with like a tank's like 2.44 GPA or something. And my parents are like, look, you can get your act together, or you can find like you can start paying for your own college and like put yourself through, because we are not going to support you if this is how you're going to treat this. And like I was miserable, I was not fitting in, I did not like it. But telecommunication news had always been like my official major. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to drop the pre-med and see if this works out for me, because I'd worked for my high school's newspaper. So I kind of sort of had a little bit of a minor basis or base in journalism, not too much. But then, like I told you, I went into the INC for the first time and got intimidated by Forrest, and then started meeting people and realizing like, these are really good people. And I really like, that's a big deal to me, is the people I surround myself with.
Absolutely.
And I love the people. And even more so, I just liked it. Like it felt right. You know what I mean?
Yep. I can still recall the day that I toured the J school. And I'm like, I gotta go in there and see it for myself, feel the atmosphere. But it feels like a big family, right? The business and news, it's a competitive industry, of course. But I feel like at the end of the day, like everyone's here to help everyone. And I hope to be able to find that kind of atmosphere within my first job if possible. It's not always possible, but it'd be nice. And it's always nice to have a support system.
Absolutely. And, I know we're going to get a little bit to advice later on, but one of my favorite things that I thought to think of in the job interviewing process was asking people at the stations I was touring, how would you describe the culture of this place? And if they say, if they say something along the lines of like, oh, we're all super hungry here, we're all super driven, that's kind of a telltale sign that it's going to be kind of a cutthroat atmosphere, and you're not going to be able to find as much support from your bosses, from your coworkers. Like, asking about culture is a big deal, because if they're like, oh, we're like one big family, that's a good sign.
Yep. And something that I found during my internship with Wesh, because I was very nervous about going to a top 20 market station,
Yeah.
being little WFT with very little experience. And what I found was the exact opposite. They had photographers there, and that's exactly what I need, right? It's not very realistic for me to be an MMJ. So once I said, I need to try a station that has those photographers so I can see if that makes it easier for me work wise, and it did. The culture was so great. It's just like one big happy family. I still keep in contact with the assistant news director and news director still today. If she hires any Gators, she always calls me up and she's like, hey, do you know this person? What do you know about them? Like, are they a good fit? So I know that right out of the gate, I'm not going to be able to, work there, but I hope in the broad scheme of things that I end up back there. I always tell her, don't retire anytime soon. And actually, shameless plug for our viewers and our listeners here, an upcoming episode will be with that assistant news director that gave me my shot at the internship. I'll also talk to one of my former professors, Harrison Hove, that was a key player in collaborating with that news station to get me an internship as a person with a disability. So yeah, it's just great. Culture is very important to me.
Absolutely.
What would you say is the most rewarding part of your job as a journalist?
So, most rewarding part of the job for me is, um, God, it's hard to choose just one because, like, on one hand, it's really nice to have like a tangible product at the end of the day and be like, this story I put together, like, this is a tangible product of how my day went, right? Like, I'll be able to go back and watch this and I'll be like, oh, yeah, that's what happened that day. So, that's really cool. But it's also, I think, for me, the people factor. um, so I think the most rewarding part is like building those relationships with people and taking the time to talk to people, not just as sources, but as human beings. Like, what does their wife do? What are their kids' names? And that's a really good way to enjoy your job a little bit more, right? If you feel that human connection while you're out and about, that's great. But it's also good for building relationships because those people, they think that you care. And if you show them that you care, they're going to be more likely to call you up when they have a story idea than they're going to be likely to call up your competition who just showed up for the interview, asked them their two questions and then gunned it off to the next location, right? So I have worked in this job. Shortly after I joined, they were like, hey, we're going to make you the reporter for this other rural coverage area that has been neglected for the past 10 years by every station in this market. And it's like, oh God. But just going down there and like meeting the people and building the relationships with those people and like just connecting with them and learning who's who, it's really rewarding because then when they start calling you and they're like, hey, there's this one crime that happened, we'll give you an exclusive on it. Excellent. Oh, there's this one thing the city's doing. I haven't told anybody else about it. Do you want to cover it? Absolutely. So the rewarding thing is like obviously like the job, but it's also the people.
Absolutely. I've seen that within my first few packages this semester. I always try to send them the final product, my subject, the final product, and every response that I've gotten is positive, and they're like, we want to work with you in the future. I said, yeah, sure. If there's any stories, send them my way, because I also have to be mindful within my storytelling, right? I talked about those extra logistical pieces that have to come into play as a journalist with a disability. So a lot of my stories need to be enterprise in that case, just in case I'm not able to turn it in a day. It's still arrival in a couple days.
That's a really good point. And it's a hard job, no matter how you cut it. It's a lot of hard work, and your success depends entirely on the generosity of other people with their time. So it's really good that you were taking those extra steps after the fact and saying, hey, thanks so much for your time today. Here's the final product. I wanted to make sure you saw it because most people don't tune into the TV anymore, but they do want to see themselves when they're on it. So I think that that's a really good thing for you to do is like follow through and show them like, hey, I paid attention to your story. I paid attention to you. Here's this thing. So good on you, man.
Exactly. So news takes up a lot of Henry's time, right? But
Yeah.
when Henry's not in the newsroom, he's not reporting. What does he like to do?
All right. So I'm kind of lame, right? Because we are in a pandemic. So like that's kind of an excuse, but it's kind of a statement. um, I will like I spend a lot of time at home, right? Like I'll play video games, I'll cook, I'll clean, I'll take care of the things that I need to do here. But I also really like to try to spend time outdoors. Um, and because like anytime you can spend outdoors is good, right? Like it's good for you. So going for runs, hikes, walks, things like that, I enjoy. And then anytime I get to spend time with other people, like you know, friends from my station or my girlfriend, even if it's just like socially distanced drinking wine on my front porch, like that's great. Count me in.
I'm a big wine person. Give me a glass of wine and I'm good. I'm there.
All right, what's your kind of wine?
Moscato.
Moscato. Okay, I can respect that.
Yep, I like the sweet stuff.
All right. I'm the polar opposite. I like the dry stuff, but
Oh
uh,
wow.
Moscato can be good stuff too.
What's your favorite? Maybe I'll take your recommendation and try it?
Personally, I really like Malbec.
Okay.
That's just, it's kind of smoky, it's kind of fruity, it's like a darker red wine. It's usually pretty dry, but there's a lot of flavor.
I'll have to give it a try.
Yeah, man.
So one of the big reasons I brought you on is not just because I love you and I look up to you, right? But I'm hoping some of our future journalists within the college will look at you and see that I've interviewed an alum just to kind of get your perspective. So if they're listening or they're watching and they're about to get ready to enter that industry, just as you have done not too long ago, what is the biggest piece of advice or encouragement that you could give us all?
Okay, so I have kind of one for each, and it was hard to pick just one. So for advice, and this is going to be, it would have been helpful for me to know. It will be, I imagine, going back to what we were talking about before you started recording and how much sexual and otherwise harassment women in this industry go through. When you're putting your reel together, would recommend creating a Google Voice number. It's entirely free. You can pick whatever area code you want. Do not put your voice or your actual phone number or contact information out there. I've gotten really weird calls and texts from my YouTube reel I posted like 2 years ago. And I've had to remove the reel and like block several numbers. So like number one, Google Voice, just do it. And then you can set up a new number with the area code of whatever market you end up going to. Like, they don't pay me to say anything like that. I wish they would, but really good service, really good for keeping contact with professional contacts who you don't necessarily want your personal phone number getting out there too.
Absolutely.
So
Didn't think of that one.
I
Because
wish somebody had told me that.
I have my contact info in my email signature, so I'll probably be removing that number now.
Yeah, and like it's probably fine at a college level, but there are really weird people out there that it's easier to not have to deal with them, right?
Okay.
So that's my piece of advice. Use Google Voice. Just download it on your phone. It's free. It's easy. And then encouragement is it gets easier, right? Like when you're working at WUFT, it is so hard, right? Those like whenever you're doing TV2, TV3, you're going out and you're doing those day shifts because the standards of the news directors at WUFT are oftentimes higher than a lot of news directors you're going to run into in the field. So the stories you are trying to cover tend to be a little bit more in depth for WUFT. Plus, it's also the factor of practice, right? Like practice makes perfect. It's hard to just like study classes, study classes. Surprise, you have this day in the middle of your week where you have to go out and use a camera, and then you're not going to get to do that again for another week. When you're doing it every single day, the consistency, it really allows you to grow a lot more and to get a better level of confidence in your work.
Absolutely. So one thing I'll mention is I'm thankful for that Gator standard, right? Because that's just gonna make it easier on us when we enter the industry. Because our expectations were already industry level expectations in college, so we know what to expect.
That's absolutely true. And, this might come across as conceited. I promise I'm not trying to be conceited. This is just speaking to the level of preparation that I received and that all of my classmates received by going through the program. Like I went into the news industry in market 38, which is now market 35. And I can hang with these people here. So if that's like the level of, teaching and instruction that the J school at UF prepares you for, like you're set, you're going to be okay at your first job. Like, don't stress.
Well, I'm hoping that you keep on moving up that ladder and we see you on that major network soon because that would be so fabulous. I am speaking it into existence right now.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So the last question I have for you is kind of like my signature question. I ask everyone that comes on the show and everyone that will come on the show this question. What do you hope the Henry Coburn legacy will be?
Oh, man. Well, that's kind of tough. Right. I want to do the best work that I can do as a journalist. But I also want to, I guess if it's leave behind a legacy, it would be to leave everywhere I go a little bit better than I found it. Whether it's a newsroom, just maybe making the overall, like lifting the product up through my, maybe photography. Maybe I have more nat pops or here or there.
Oh, not
Or whether that's just life. Like I just want to make things better than I found them.
absolutely. Well, I appreciate you so much, Henry. It was so wonderful to catch up with you, network with you, and I learned some things too that I need to get ready for and brush up on as I get ready to enter the industry here in August.
Well,
Well,
bro, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. It really made me feel happy that you invited me onto your show. So thank you for that. Shout out to what you're doing. You're putting in really hard work. You're doing really big things, and you have a really, really bright future, Drew.
absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course, man.
Well, folks, you just listened or watched another episode of the Drew's News podcast. If you have a testimony that you'd like to share or know someone who's doing good in the world, let me know. I'd love to share their story as well. Or if you have a topic you would like me to cover, reach out because after all, I want to produce the content that you all would like to see. You can reach out to me via email at deesreports@gmail.com or follow me on social media on all platforms at Drew D's Reports. And as always, if you can dream it, you can drew it.